What's up everyone, Pratima here. So this is the new Nothing Phone 3A, and like every other Nothing phone ever, this guy has also created a lot of hype in the tech community. There's a new camera, a quirky new button, and a few other upgrades over last year's Nothing Phone 2A, making this a pretty balanced phone under 25,000 rupees right now, at least on paper. But you know how they say the devil is in the details, right? So instead of rushing this review, I took my time and waited for the first software update to drop to get a proper idea about the Phone 3A. So as always, let me start my experience with the positives first, and the design is something that I have been in love with at first sight. Nothing is one of the few smartphone brands that knows how to make phones that aren't boring to look at, and the Phone 3A keeps that energy alive. Nothing has also upgraded the back panel to glass, so it's got a better hands-on feel this time versus last year's Nothing Phone 2A. And it now has better IP rating to IP64 versus IP54. And of course, how can I forget Nothing's funky glyph lights? This is such a cool visual element that it's always the first thing I check out every time I get to use a new Nothing phone. I also love how genuinely useful its essential notifications feature is. This basically keeps me from being distracted by all the unnecessary notifications by only lighting up when I receive a notification from select apps that I have pre-programmed. However, I'm a little too sad to see that the progress bar still only works with a couple of apps like Uber, Zomato, and Google Calendar, and that is all. We also get this fancy new button called Essential Key that sits right below the power button. So with this button, I can single press it to take a screenshot, long press to attach a voice memo, and double press to enter the essential space itself where all my memories and ideas rest. The AI then comes in and analyzes everything by extracting text from an image or transcribing and summarizing my recordings if needed to generate useful insights or action points. But I feel like Essential Space is pretty half-baked right now, and for an AI product, it simply does not feel all that intelligent to me. Now don't get me wrong, it works perfectly fine for organizing my screenshots, voice notes and stuff, although I expected a bit more. For example, there was this one time when I recorded a memo asking it to remind me to buy some flowers for my mom, which sounds simple enough, right? But instead of following up with a what time or when, the Phone 3A randomly decided to set the reminder at 10 in the morning the next day. If I asked Gemini to do the same, it's actually intelligent enough to ask some follow-up questions before getting the job done. Then there's also the big question mark with privacy, since all of this AI processing is happening on the cloud, not locally, because the Nothing Phone 3A's neural processor is just not that powerful enough. Anyway, I have very few complaints in the display department though. We get a big 6.77 inches AMOLED panel with slightly thick bezels, a smooth 120Hz refresh rate, excellent colors, high frequency PWM dimming, and pretty much everything else I would expect from a mid-range phone these days. I also love the typing experience on this thing because of the fast touch response and sharp haptics. And I found the stereo speakers to be louder with a bit more oomph compared to the Nothing Phone 2A as well. Plus, the Nothing Phone 3A can get much brighter too, both in terms of full screen brightness for clear visibility outdoors or when I'm watching HDR content. However, HDR video playback on Netflix is missing here, which I am hoping an update will fix. Another thing that could have been better here is the position of the fingerprint sensor. It still sits at the bottom of the display, making it a little difficult to reach for someone like me with small hands. Even on the performance aspect, Nothing has gone with Qualcomm Snapdragon 7S Gen 3 chip this time, and I am not entirely sure if that was the right move because it's barely an upgrade over the Phone 2A's Dimensity 7200 Pro, no matter what benchmark you look at. Plus, I was at least expecting Nothing to jump to a UFS 3.1 storage instead of the slower UFS 2.2 speeds, but that did not come true either. That being said, the Nothing Phone 3A did manage better average FPS and better 5% lower FPS when I played PUBG and Genshin Impact on these two. And since it has a bigger 40% larger vapor chamber, I noticed it to be cooler than the Nothing Phone 2A by 2 to 3 degrees as well. Still, if you're a serious gamer, you should probably get something like the Poco F6 or the newly launched iQOO Neo 10R. But the thing is, you won't be getting the clean, smooth and fun software experience of the Nothing OS 3.1 on those gaming beasts. The Nothing OS is one of my favorite Android skins, and with the version 3.1, Nothing's main focus was basically on two things: more customization options and better system stability overall. I also noticed that the camera app has slightly faster image processing, so that is nice too. One weird thing is Nothing OS still does not have those fancy image editing or text generating AI features that you would find on every other phone these days. Although the bottom line is that you are going to end up loving what Nothing has done with its latest software. Nothing also has upgraded its software update policy. We get 3 more years of Android updates and 6 years of security updates, which is certainly not Samsung level of updates, but I am fine with 3 plus 6 years of updates on a mid-range phone. As for battery life, there isn't much of an upgrade on the phone 3A since it has the same 5000 mAh lithium-ion, not silicon carbon battery as the phone 2A, which means I was getting similar 7 to 8 hours of screen on time on my regular usage, just like the Nothing Phone 2A. The charging speed has slightly gone up to 50 watt from 45 watt, but you still don't get a charger inside the box, and the journey from 0 to 100% still takes a little over an hour. Okay, finally, let me talk about the cameras, and this is the first Nothing phone with a dedicated 2x telephoto lens, and comparing its cameras with the Nothing Phone 2A, its zoom shots are clearly better than the Phone 2A, be it in terms of details or dynamic range. And this dedicated zoom lens also means better portraits. As you can see from these samples, it takes much better portraits than the Phone 2A. It's got better details and the edge detection is more accurate too. I especially like how well it renders the skin tone versus the Phone 2A's contrasty and pinkish tint. What's even more impressive is that I can even shoot from 70mm and 100mm portraits from the Phone 3A with minimal loss of details. I'm also digging the selfies from the Phone 3A. Just like the portraits, it manages more natural skin tone, the background exposure is well taken care of, plus it's got a wider field of view too. But I did find a lot of inconsistencies with the Phone 3A's main camera. It uses the same 50 megapixel sensor as the one on the Phone 2A, although the tuning is wildly different. As you can see from these samples, they both preserve a nice amount of detail, and the Phone 3A does have better dynamic range sometimes, but like 60 to 70% of the time, I prefer what the Phone 2A captures because of how nice the colors and the contrast are. The Phone 3A also likes to blow out the highlights from time to time, whereas it simply fails to process the color red, turning a bright red color somewhat orangish. Likewise, we get a downgraded ultrawide camera. Compared to Phone 2A's 50 megapixel ultrawide shooter, we get a smaller, lower res 8 megapixel sensor with a narrower field of view. For what it's worth, the Phone 3A's ultrawide shots during the day are not too bad, and it actually has better dynamic range most of the time. But when it gets dark, you can clearly see how it tries to brighten up the image almost every single time, and the Phone 2A's ultra-wide angle photos are significantly better. On top of that, you cannot shoot 4K 30fps videos from the Phone 3A's ultra-wide camera as well, just 1080p. So the ultra-wide angle camera is sadly a downgrade this time around. From the main camera, you can shoot decent 4K 30fps videos though, stabilization wise. The quality is not bad either, but there's a little bit of highlight management issue sometimes, and when you record videos while moving, you will notice a bit of a jitters too. From the selfie camera, you can only shoot 1080p videos, and I found them to be a bit contrasty. Stabilization is good enough, but a 4K option would have been better. The details are just not there in 1080p videos. But overall, despite the shortcomings, I believe the Nothing Phone 3A is one of the best balanced mid-range phones you can buy right now. Besides the head-turning design, it also has a fantastic OLED display, all-day battery life, and smooth software experience. A combination that's truly hard to find in this segment. So yeah, like last year's Nothing Phone 2A, this year too, the Phone 3A is among the few mid-range devices that carefully avoids any of those deal-breaker types of issues. Plus, if you look back at Nothing's history of software updates, I'm sure things like camera optimization will be sorted out with a couple of updates, making it such a balanced mid-range phone. Alright everybody, that was my full and quite detailed review of the Nothing Phone 3A. Do let me know in the comments below if you have any more questions about this phone, and while you're there, do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Saying this, I'm Pratima and I will see you in the next one.